Welcome to Scramble Game Show. As usual, we devote the first 30 minutes to an interview, and we have a guest today. Our guest is our county legislator, Mr. George Soros. Now, as you know, this is the election time. A lot of politicians are running for office, and certainly many issues are brought up. And our show, as we set out to do, is for the community education. We would like to incorporate these political views and candidates' opinions into our show so that our community can have a better understanding what are the issues and what they are voting for. Now, although Mr. Soros is not running for office this time, but we have a very important issue that is sort of on the table, and that is the housing issue that I think I will leave to Mr. Soros to explain, that concerns all of us in this county, okay? Particularly now this year as we have this housing sort of a bubble bursted and we are in a slum, and the housing problems is kind of in a peculiar state or situation. So let me invite our guest, Mr. Soros, to our show.
Thank you.
George.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you for coming. And I know you are very busy, and this is time of year that everybody wants your time. But I think this issue is important, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, it's extremely important. It is a lawsuit of great magnitude. It's going to be a very expensive settlement that the legislature agreed to do. Interestingly enough, there were bipartisan support against this settlement.
I would wind back a little bit, okay? Because for our audience, and particularly say we want to educate our including our kids and families, so on. What is the origin? Okay, of course we know the housing is always the issue. In way back, we want everybody to be able to afford housing, and we want to help the poor, and so on and so forth. It's a social issue, right?
Right.
And that's the background. But how does it come around to Westchester for this particular case?
Well, this particular case is actually a good example of why some state governors refused to take federal stimulus money when it first came out. Mm-hmm. Every federal dollar that you receive...
There's strings attached.
This had more than a string. It was like a tow line, let me tell you. Because what happened here is, over the years, Westchester County has accepted something called Community Development Block Grant money. Mm-hmm. And under that program, we are supposed to certify to the federal government what we are doing to overcome obstacles or impediments to what's called fair housing. Now, fair housing isn't necessarily affordable housing. That's a part of it. Fair housing is more that people of color, people of different ethnic, religious backgrounds are not being discriminated against and are able to get homes in Westchester. What happened here is an outside, it's not, one of the things people have to understand, this was not an aggrieved citizen of Westchester who tried to buy a house in Somers or Bedford or Cortland and was denied because of the color of their skin, and they bought a lawsuit. This was actually bought by an organization that said we did not comply with something called the Federal False Claims Act, which is a law from the 1860s. It was pushed into law by Abraham Lincoln because of inferior supplies being manufactured and sold to the Union soldiers. And what the Federal False Claims Act does is that allows any private citizen basically to be a bounty hunter. If you believe the federal government is being cheated, you can bring a lawsuit under this action, and if you prove that the person providing the goods or service is defrauding the government, you can receive up to 3 times the amount of the damages or what the federal government paid for that good or service.
So this is really like a bounty hunter
Correct.
Professionally trying to get income.
Correct. So these folks down there bought the lawsuit saying that when we took this money, the federal government, the county, did not comply with all of the standards and all of the reporting that has to be done with this. And so that's what the whole lawsuit was about, because it's erroneous now, we know, but apparently I think the feeling was by the bureaucrats in the county government is that we didn't have to address impediments to housing based on race, because quite frankly they felt there aren't any. That's an issue and a debate for another day. The reality is we didn't dot the T and cross the I that we should have, And so this lawsuit, the door was open to the lawsuit. However, the other thing people have to understand is we did not lose any lawsuit. Both sides to this legal action brought what's called a motion for summary judgment. The judge said, no, I'm not granting the motion for summary judgment to either of you because there are what
Very
are
complex,
called
too.
complex. There are issues of fact. There are issues to be tried, and we want to go forward. But for whatever reason, the Spano administration decided to try to reach an out-of-court settlement. A number of us on the board, and it's interesting, there were 5 negative votes on this. There are 7 practicing attorneys on the Board of Legislators out of 17 of us. 5 of those 7 lawyers voted no, including myself.
I see.
And I think part of that is because when we read this stipulation of settlement and when we read the record, the court record, we felt that had we gone to trial, we might have had a pretty decent chance to succeed. Certainly at the appellate level, we probably had even a better chance to succeed because this was a very activist judge. You could tell by her, the decision she rendered in the summary judgment. But we felt there was a chance to win because we don't believe the Federal False Claims Act, the purpose of it and the intent was to punish other levels of government necessarily. So that's why some of us voted against the settlement. And frankly, there are other reasons to be against the settlement too, and I'll be happy to go into any of them.
It's always confusing to me that we always sort of have social issues being sort of brought to a political solution. Okay, I consider that the housing is a social issue, but somehow the federal government or the law is always bring a political solution to the social problem.
Right.
Now, the social problem certainly has many factors and dependencies on the social fabric, society, community, town, state, local level, and so on. And political solution also have dependency, but they may not coincide. In fact, sometimes quite opposite. So that kind of a force fit, okay, a problem and solution,
right,
often produce problems.
Yeah, well, I think this stipulation of settlement and the solution proposed there is going to create problems. It does a lot of things that aren't very practical and don't make sense. It's an attempt to put housing, basically what the settlement says is if your community, and actually it's not even the community, it's broken down by census blocks. If you are in a census block where less than 7% of the population is Latino and less than 3.5% is African American, you are now a targeted area and have to have affordable housing. The other problem with it is we are obligated under the stipulation of settlement to market those homes to people outside of Westchester County, to the surrounding region. So your county tax dollars are going to build housing for people that didn't grow up in this county.
Right.
And I think that was one of the things that disturbed a number of us who voted no.
Yes.
The county's done a pretty decent job trying to build affordable housing.
Yeah.
A lot of communities want to build affordable housing, what they call workforce housing,
Yes.
for their own
For
volunteers.
employees, for civil
Correct.
servants, and so on. Yeah.
And in many respects, this thing really puts the kibosh on that because it's going to require us with each of these that are built to market it outside of the area. So we're not going to really be
actually,
helping them.
I don't know whether I read somewhere, I just heard somewhere, this actually produced a population switch in a way is driving productive people that making decent income out of state,
Right.
and bring in people that making, of course, below
Right.
this level of income
Well,
into the state. And doesn't seem to help the state in any way in a social sense.
Well, I don't
in
know
the
that
economic sense.
I don't know that it actually helps the society at large either. You were making a good point before about the political and the social. The way to, I think, bring about more integration and diversity in these communities is not to force cheaper housing into that area.
Right.
It's to lift the education and the opportunity
Exactly.
of
That's
all
a social
people.
solution
Correct.
to a social problem.
So
Yeah.
that people of every color and stripe and nationality and everything are in a position that they can afford that bigger home, or they can afford to live in a particular
Yeah, and
neighborhood.
this is
And that's what we need to really be focused on instead of the artificial means here.
Yeah, the artificial means is really the so-called entitlement.
Right.
Once you use the entitlement, it destroys the fundamental principle this country is based on.
Well, I tell a little interesting story. When I tried out for the Pony League after playing Little League Baseball.
Yeah.
And my first time in the tryouts, I washed out. I didn't get there, and I was a little upset. And my father said to me, he says, listen, in life there are equal opportunities,
right,
but there are not equal outcomes. You had the same chance that all the other kids had,
right,
but the outcome wasn't the same for you.
True.
And that's how it is in life. But the idea is we should absolutely provide everybody with the equal opportunity.
Right.
But there's no guarantee, and
For
there should
equal
be no
outcome.
guarantee. Right.
It's just like the end game has to be equal. Then
Right.
This is really hard.
Right.
I guess now this case, the settlement portion, is that due to the judge's decision, or
No,
since yours?
this is a decision that was reached by the Spano administration and the litigants and the Department of Justice, which intervened into the case, and then the Board of Legislators ratified that settlement. But I don't think it's going to end us from being in court again someday. There are very severe penalties for the failure for the county to build the 750 units of housing. We are going to be under the oversight of a federal monitor. That monitor is somebody who serves at the complete pleasure of the Justice Department. So if the federal government thinks that the monitor is cutting us too much slack for some reason, that monitor could be gone. We have benchmarks we have to meet, and there are concerns in there that if we don't reach these benchmarks and meet compliance, the county may be put in a position where we end up having to sue local governments to change their zoning and do all kinds of things, or perhaps withhold county funding for projects because, let's say, I don't want to use a town's name, Town X decides that they can't.
It creates potential legal problems
Correct.
between local governments, right?
Correct.
Yeah. I still have a question that is, this bounty hunting type of process got this lawsuit. Presumably their purpose is to get money.
Yes,
right?
they're getting
Right, they're getting money.
Yes.
So why is necessary to settle into this kind of agreement, which has nothing to do with that money that this bounty hunter is looking for?
Dr. Chang, you must have been watching part of our debate at the legislature. That's what a number of us said. There is nothing in the Federal False Claims Act that provides for what we call an equitable settlement, where you have to do some kind of restitution or something. It is simply money damages.
Right.
So you are correct. Had we gone to trial,
Yeah.
the worst case is that we would have lost.
Assess the damage, right?
The damage, and the damages were pretty accessible. It was approximately $50 million that the county had collected in community development block grant money for the period we were being sued for. So they would have been entitled to up to $150 million. Many of us argued that a court would not impose on
maximum.
the maximum on a municipality.
Yeah.
It might on a corporate entity or somebody like that. It might if they had shown that
Intent. Also the intent.
Correct. That we were purposely doing this something. I don't think that would have been proven, and I think that while they may have gotten some money damages, they wouldn't have gotten that, and we would not have to go through living with a federal monitor, trying to hit these targeted areas with housing, and all of the myriad of problems that I think this settlement is ultimately going to bring upon the county.
Yeah, so that's why lead me to think whether it's the county administration or whatever philosophy has driven them into a settlement that has seemed to, enlarge itself beyond this, original lawsuit.
Correct. Yeah, it also goes to, one of the concerns that we had at the legislature is we began to question how the county's being run and the management, and we're worried that are there other areas here where we participated in federal programs and not stuck to the regulations or filed the proper reports and all of that. It's a very hefty price to pay, by the way,
True.
for not
and also,
adhering to the rules.
It's a fair question for all other local government to ask whether they are bound by this. Let's say a small town, a community that fall under this settlement, that how all of a sudden they have to bring in certain number of housing and
Correct.
so forth, totally sort of uprooted their social balance and whatever reason.
Well, yeah, there's lots of reasons. I mean, in northern Westchester here, a large part of the county is the New York City watershed.
Yeah.
There are very stringent regulations
Right,
on housing.
right.
A second thing is somebody that's at 80% of median income, not making that much money, does it make a lot of sense for them to buy a home in Pound Ridge when they're not near a bus line or a train line?
Exactly. Those
or
are the social
jobs.
fabrics that
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's misguided. The other thing is it prohibits us. It limits the amount of senior affordable housing we can build now.
Yeah.
It also limits the amount of rehab building. One of the things the county's been very successful doing, and it makes it much less expensive to do, is to take apartment buildings or densely populated urban areas where you can get more bang for the buck in terms of buying the land or rehabbing an existing building.
Right.
We're limited on the amount of buildings we can rehab now, and we are prohibited, well, not prohibited, but under the settlement, these first 750 homes have to go in areas outside of urban areas. It's got to go into these other targeted communities. So in a lot of ways, it's going to retard and really inhibit
damage the other social
absolutely,
adjustments
and the providing of affordable housing, perhaps in areas that may need it even more so, than some of these other areas.
Yeah. And plus putting more burden on local government in terms of roads, transportation, buses, and so on. Where'd the money come from?
Well, that's, again, those of us that voted no, we're concerned about that, because when you read through the stipulation of settlement, we may be in a position a few years down the road when we go back to the judge and the monitor and say, we tried to build 75 homes in the town of Bedford, but the problem is the roads aren't big enough.
Yeah.
Well, the federal government and the monitor and the court may say, well, then county, go fix their roads.
Yeah.
Which means
money.
County taxpayers will have to build for more infrastructure. So to me, it was an open-ended agreement in terms of the money, despite the fact that we only have to commit this initial $60 million
so
up
this
front.
agreement is passed,
it's
by
passed.
the legislators.
There. We've got to live with it. And one of the things is we don't know how it's going to be implemented, because the administration has not yet devised the implementation plan. They have to do that by the middle of December. So one of the things that I've been very active about is going to my local communities that I represent, and also urging the Spano administration and those people in White Plains to start working with these local governments, because don't come up with an implementation plan that they can't live with. We've got to make sure.
No, not only they, I mean, we all.
Yes.
I mean, the Westchester itself cannot live with. Yeah?
Right. So there were so many reasons not to vote for this that, to me, I know some of my colleagues struggled a little bit because you are taking a risk. You go to trial. You don't know ultimately what it might end up costing. But when I weighed all these other factors, to me, it came down to I thought the risk of going forward with this stipulation was more onerous on the people I represent than going to trial. And also that some of these things just were, to me, a little bit backwards. I didn't see that this was going to accomplish what we're trying to accomplish, which is getting decent, affordable housing for Westchester people.
Right.
And not,
well, you as a minority leader in this legislation.
by the way, the Republicans in a minority are not a protected minority class in the...
I understand. I understand.
Yeah,
but I just feel that it obviously, if this is passed, the majority must have dominated the vote.
They did. But interestingly enough, the majority leader, the actual leader of the Democratic members of the legislature, joined me in voting no, as did another Democratic member of the legislature. So it cut across party lines.
That's a honest vote, or not for show.
Yeah, no, I think it's an honest vote. I honestly think that, as I said, I think before, 5 of the 7 practicing attorneys on that board voted no. Republican, Democrat, didn't matter. And I think it's because each of us read the stipulation of settlement. We know what that means. That's an iron-bound contract we've signed now. And we can have assurances on the outside, and we can have side letters from the Department of Justice. The reality is, however, that settlement speaks for itself. In fact, even the side letters we have state that right up front, that the stipulation speaks for itself. It is what it is. And when you read that, there are some things in there that I think are a little bit too ambiguous and open-ended. And with a very activist, agenda-driven judge and Justice Department from Washington.
If we have a county government is leaning this in that direction, we will really have a big problem.
Yeah. So it's unfortunate now. I mean, my goal now I've lost that battle, but the implementation plan will be the next battle. We don't get to vote on that. The legislature doesn't under the stipulation of settlement. Another reason that that some of us didn't support it. It's just going to be announced by the county executive, and
So it's
gonna go
purely
forward.
an executive power decision in
The
this.
implementation plan is, there are aspects of it that might have to come back to us for a vote.
From budget point of
yeah,
view.
if we have, from a budget point of view, correct, so.
So now we sort of understand this is a little bit. Now what's remaining to be done is to sort of figure out the implementation.
Right.
Now at this point, election is coming. I'm sure that this probably is not going to be on anybody's urgency at this moment.
No, and
until after the election, right?
Could very well be why there is no implementation plan yet.
Right.
And they have till December, and it
Right.
probably won't
so,
come out
So
till
whoever
December.
gets elected into the office of county executive would suddenly have to pick this up.
Well, no, it will be done by this county executive because his term doesn't expire till December 31st. We have to present
So it is on the table.
well, it is, but they haven't announced anything publicly yet. They're working on it. It has to be presented to the judge, the litigants, all the parties. It was 120 days from August 11th.
Well,
I think it's December 11th. It'll have to be.
That means, I think, for citizens, for residents, for communities, sort of benefit, we really have to really get this thing, to the public early on.
Well,
otherwise, you might, I'm not
Yeah.
saying it will be, but it's possible that you have an implementation plan that is depending on the outcome of the election that go one way or the other, could be 180 degree apart.
Well, whoever is sworn in on January 1st is going to have to live with this plan because it does have to be delivered.
That's the problem,
to
right?
the court,
so,
right?
So this gives so much power for the incumbent,
Correct.
whether he's elected or not elected,
Right.
to make a decision that's going to have a far-reaching consequences, and yet he may and may not be accountable.
Not only that, he doesn't even have to tell us what it is before we decide to vote for him or not.
Exactly.
So yeah.
So this is more serious than what I thought. I mean,
Yeah.
this is not something that's okay. Let's see when we vote a new executive, maybe doing something a little more diligent or something. This is a done deal.
Correct. And again, I hate to say it, another reason some of us felt that we should have voted down the settlement. The trial was supposed to start November 4.
Wait till next year.
The trial would have started November 4. The reality is, we were told by attorneys, neither side was ready for trial. So if we had voted this down,
it's very easy to delay trial.
exactly,
You know that.
exactly. So what would have happened is, if the legislature had voted this down, all the parties would have had to go back to the table. A lot of the concerns I just mentioned to you could have perhaps been addressed in a new settlement that might have been more clear, might have been more limited on what we had to do as a county. All of those things could have been out there. But I think in a lot of ways, this was done out of political expediency to get it past this election cycle, saying that, okay, now it's done, it's over with, and there's an attempt by some to put a positive spin on this, that this is the greatest thing that could have happened to the county. It isn't, and honestly, it's hard to say whether it's as bad as I say or as good as they say, because until we see the implementation plan, until we see how this goes over the next 6 years, until we really know the impact of getting this done or not getting it done, we don't know. We really don't know.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you are on this show, because now I realize it's more important and more serious, and I think we owe the citizens of Westchester County to really ask to see this implementation, before the election.
Right.
I mean, this is, we only have 4 weeks, 5 weeks to election.
Correct.
So is there any group or organization that is sort of looking after this issue?
The 5 of us that voted against the settlement. I could speak. I don't want to speak for my other colleagues, but certainly the 5 of us that voted no urged for this, and I would hope that the public, the people watching here,
are there any websites that you have for the citizens?
Well,
to
I have my own little website, which is called Common Sense Now, but that this
commonsense.com.
Common Sense Now.
.com.
Yeah,
Okay.
and this is one of the issues I write a
I think
commentary on, and I bring these things.
we really need to have a sort of a grassroots type of action to demand to see what implementation is, and we like to see that as soon as possible, not become a sort of after the election that nothing you can do about it. Particularly the fact that if the incumbent is not maintaining the office, then there's totally has a disconnect.
You know, the time is right. It's election time, and you don't have to just ask the county executive. If you have candidates for county legislature, you should ask them to demand that this come out as sooner rather than later. And even your local officials that are running.
Is there
this
any
year.
way of binding that? I mean, can legislators
we can't.
asking for a plan to be presented or
There's only one way
be
we
brave,
could have.
briefed?
The only way we could have done that is if we had voted this down. If we had said to the county executive, listen, unless we see this implementation plan, we're not voting for this, then we would have seen it. But, you know, it takes backbone to stand up and vote no. There was a lot of pressure brought on the legislature to approve this. You know, I understand why some people voted yes. I'm not saying that they didn't have some valid arguments. They did. But I think for things like this, that was the only way we could have forced the administration to come up with that plan, to say, unless we see this plan, we're not even bringing this up for a vote.
That's true. Yeah,
You know?
I think that's.
Sometimes we fail to do that as a legislature, and I do wish that you know, I won't be there next term because I'm not running for re-election. But I hope that the
You're not?
I'm not running for re-election. No.
Why is that?
Well, I've been there 14 years, and you know, I got elected saying I believed in term limits, and I think I probably went past what would be a legitimate term limit. I think it's good for government to get new people involved. I've enjoyed all 14 years that I've served there.
I hope there is a plan, you know.
Oh, I'm
following,
not going
right?
away. I am not leaving
you know,
politics.
Every show host always like to have someone to scoop the secret.
Well, I don't have anything to announce today, but there are plans, and I am looking
Don't worry.
down the road.
My nickname is Dr. Wordman, not Letterman.
Okay.
So I'm not going to force you to scoop
All right.
out something.
But I do have my Common Sense Now PAC, which is a political action committee, and I am going to focus on those things. And I am a lawyer. I have my law practice. I have a lot of activities I'm involved with. But yeah, I will be looking at things next year. But I just felt it was time to move on and give somebody else a chance.
Now after hearing all of this, and I understand better now, so whoever political candidates that is going to be on my show from now till the election, I'm going to bring this issue up.
Great.
I'm going to put pressure on the politicians because this can be a serious problem.
Yes.
Yeah. So we need to address it as early as is possible, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So I tell you, when you talk about this kind of issue and when you become passionate about it and so on, time just flies.
Yes, it does. It does.
We have a half an hour and then that time is almost up. So any words you want to say just before we sort of winding
No,
up?
but I'm happy to come back on your show. Next time we can talk about why does Westchester County have the highest taxes, property taxes,
Wow,
of
there are a lot of
anywhere in the
other
country.
issues. Yes, yes.
I can enlighten some of your viewers on that too.
Very good. Okay. All right. So the time is coming to a close,
Okay.
and I thank you very much for
Dr.
joining
Chang.
us.
It was a pleasure.
And
Enjoyed it.
I would like to address our community. Starting out, I actually was kind of ignorant about this issue. I read a little bit and so forth, and the more I read it, the more confused, and that's the reason we invited Mr. Soros to our show. I think hopefully you now understand this issue is quite serious. It's important to our county. So bring your voice up and go talk to your elected officials, and we need to address this as soon as possible so that we won't get hit as another big, balloon bust, right? So next, we will come back to our game show. Stay with us, stay in tune in a few seconds.